Hello everyone. Today I'm Dr. Shaina Saif, and I would be taking up certain queries or any issues related to the paper Social Policy and Planning. I guess I would wait for some time for any participants, and then I'll talk about the relationship between social movements and social policy. I would summarize it how social movements could be effective in, or rather, how social movements shape. And it's linked with the idea of social policy and how both social movement as well as policy prescriptions can help in making, or rather talking about the welfare aspect, bringing about any changes in the society. And the word term social movement, it was introduced in 1850 by a German sociologist, Lawrence von Stein, in his book History of the French Social Movement from 1789 to the present 1850. So social movement, it is about carrying out, resisting or undoing a social change, and these are universal, which found in all societies in the past as well as in the present. The scope, nature, frequency, it may vary depending upon what kind of movement, what is the agitation, or what is the movement for. In the early period of political formations, social movements usually it shape the state, its functions, responsibilities, as well as accountability, and also had its political boundary. And they played a very significant role in the distribution of power among various segments in the society. And in fact, they not always play a very decisive role in the political system, but nevertheless they make certain assertions, and there's a certain norms of behavior when it is when we talk about social movements. And it it the reflections, the social and political conflict, as well as the expectations of the people, get reflected in the movements. So the term social movement had gained currency in European languages in the 19th century, and it is can be considered as a deliberate collective endeavor to promote a direction, and by means not excluding violence, illegality, revolution, or withdrawal. Right. So there are certain basic elements which are part of a social movement. We can say that social movements, they are uh, uh, it's a collective behavior. A considerable number of persons must be involved in it. Secondly, it can be said that it extends beyond a single event or community, and it's spread across several communities. And then involves systematic efforts, which talks about coordinated activities rather than just a random expression of the opinions, or whatever expressions they have. Then social movements are change oriented. They have their objective. There's some form of change in the way people think, they believe, and the behavior. So they have the objective that the protection of existing values and norms which appear to be threatened or of revivalist nature. There are few definitions which had been given by various scholars like Herbert Blumer, and according to him, social movement can be viewed as a collective enterprise to establish a new order of life. They have their inception in the condition of unrest, and derive their motive power on one hand from dissatisfaction with the current form of life, and on the other from wishes and hopes for a new scheme or system of living. And Doc McAdam has also defined social movements as organized efforts on the part of excluded groups to promote or resist changes in the structure of society that involve recourse to non-institutional forms of political participation. And it can be said the social movements are defined by the ability to move large number of people to action to achieve structural as well as normative transformation on a national or broader scale. So it unites people through multiple strategies, shared principles, and goals. And they usually there are three aspects of social movement. It can be said that there is a collective action. It tends, when the movement comes into existence, the sole objective is to bring about certain social change. And thirdly, there is a common purpose. So clearly, it can be said that movements are of important. It's a collective challenges which is based on common purposes, social solidarities, in sustained interaction with elites, opponents, as well as suppress authorities. Now, social movements are equally important because they help in form and organize dissent. When it is not necessary that every time you are in link or in on the same page with the government or with the changes in the society. So it is an organized form of dissent, and it provides a possibility for articulation of any grievances and problems. They build pressure on the state, they keep check over the authority, mediate for healthy democracy, and it is a way of people's segment, or it is a collective politics to express their aspirations as well as the priorities. So without understanding politics of the people, we cannot understand the complexities and dynamics of a political system. And there are various main components of social movements, like objectives. There has to be well defined objective, ideology, program, leadership, organization, and the interdependent influencing each other. Of course, when we talk about the various characteristics of movement, it can be said that it expresses the dissatisfaction of people. The members of the movement expect that something will be done about the matter. Then they are highly organized. Social movements are highly organized. Group of people who feel very strongly about a matter. Propaganda, it propagates certain issues or concerns when public attention is being drawn towards certain matters. It also influences public opinion. They have the potential to bring about drastic social changes, transform the society. It has potential strength which should not be underestimated. Now, there are three important reasons behind that why social movements comes into existence or usually arise. It's relative deprivation, structural strain, and revitalization. When you talk about large number of people come together to collectively resolve a issue or problem they face and which they have in common. And people, first of all, they understand what the problem is. The problem must be observable. Secondly, the objective, when people become aware of the problem, it means that their consciousness of the problem is real, and now they are subjectively aware of that objective situation and the exists in reality, but only the people will understand the problem and will try to find out means to overcome. So, relative deprivation, which is coined by Samuel Stoff, which was data developed by Robert K. Merton. Then, structural strain, theory of collective behavior, and revitalization movements has stated that the emergence of social movements is because of the intentional, planned, organized, and conscious moves of the part. Now, if you talk about types of movements, there are various types of social movements: resistance movements, reform or revisionary movements, revolutionary movements. Then you have expressive movements. I had mentioned earlier also that there are a lot of movements, then redemptive movements, alternative movements, transformative, regressive, utopian, escapist, retreatist, assimilationist, pluralist, millenary, migratory. Then, apart from these movements, there are certain stages of movements which is again important. Like if you talk about the first stage of social movement is known as the emergence, or as described by Bloomer, the social ferment stage. And within this stage, social movements are very preliminary, and there is little or no organization at all. Instead, the stage can be thought of as a widespread discontent and potential movement. They slowly and steadily they come together, and there will be a lot of dissatisfaction, but then later on they collectively become a part of that, because it's just starting. It is a very early stage of the movement, so people will start considering as an organization, and they'll be associating with the issue or with the problem. Then second stage would be a coalescence in a stage in the life cycle where some obstacles which may never overcome, but often, after that social unrest or discontent passes without any I mean, people in the community will then all of a sudden will come together. They may complain about certain issues or general injustice, but then this is a populist stage where clearly it is clearly been there's a sense of described as a sense of discontentment, but then it is no longer just a general sense of unease, but now it is considered to be a sense of what the unease is about and who or what is responsible. So now, but the people are now collectively thinking about that what the issue is, and it is unrest, it is longer, and it becomes overt, epidemic, and exoteric. And discontent is no longer uncoordinated and individual, it tends to be focalized and collective. So the discontentment, where there was a lot of confusion in the earlier stage, now people start realizing that what has to be done, individual will start participating and proceeding to the next stage. Then the third stage is the bureaucratization, and again, this stage defined by Bloomer as formalization, where there's a higher level of organization and coalition-based strategy. So in this stage, social movements have had some success, that they have raised awareness and their coordinated strategy. They'll bring about, certain ways of tackling the issues. They make it out more formalization, that can be tackled. I mean, the issues and the problems will be tackled. Then of course there is decline. The last stage of the social movement life cycle is the decline or institutionalization, and it does not necessarily means failure, but instead there are four part of it: repression, co-optation, success, and failure. So the first social movement under the decline stage is, it could be repression, in that through repression occurs when the authorities or the agents acting on behalf of the authorities, it uses measures to control or destroy any social movements. This means that the parties, the government, will often pass laws outlawing specific movement activities. So that is repressing uh, the cause, or trying to repress the feelings or emotions associated, the activities which has been carried out members. Then cooptation, movements can also decline if the organizations are highly dependent on centralized authority, or and then cooptation would occur, where movement leaders would associate themselves with authorities or with the other social movement constituents. So a leader could be asked to work for the organization, and then they'll club together. The leader, the viewpoint, the ideology, the objective of the movement will be taken up by the government, or they would be a merger in that process. Then of course success, social movement will come out as a success there, neither through repression or cooptation, but when they are successful, then they have been declined. Failure, of course, it means the strategic failing, when the movement is dispersed, when the movement has not been, it is fragmented, it is not has come up to the goal, it has not achieved the goal for which it has formed. And then sometimes it is establishment with the mainstream stream. I mean, there are few. I mean, I'm talking about the movement part of it, and then the social movements. There are a lot of social movements. There's a lot of movements in India also, which like the peasant movement, the tribal movement, women movement, environmental movement, global social movement, and they have a very strong relationship. When we talk about the connection of movement, the relationship between movement as well as policy, these movements, in fact, there had been a research on the relationship between the social movements and public social policy, because it is oscillating between the movement centered and policy centered studies. And in fact, they talk about what has to be done, and when movements outcomes, it advances the interest of the adherents or beneficiaries, and it tries to have challenging the inequalities and mobilizing through greater justice, democracy, so which bring progressive policy changes. Like we can say that social movement world become ubiquitous in political bargaining, as political party decisions and political decisions are contested, and then people come together, so they bring about a lot of changes in the society. And these movements, they influence observables, scholars, they started analyzing strategies which can be deployed to achieve political goals. And therefore they try to, they aim to explore the diverse pathways movement take, from collective actions, activists, political alliances, and public opinion. So the direct effect model maintains that movement can have a positive impact on policy through their own forces and in the absence of external support. So in a way we can say that social movements as challenges of inequality, exclusion, and the status quo of a society will help or will seek to influence public policies in multiple spheres in order to secure the rights, entitlement, whether these are social rights, cultural rights, economic and political domains. Overall, we can it can be said that it through movement, policies can be revised, it can be reviewed, it can be a combination of various strategies which has been deployed by the various leaders in the movements to influence policy making, which calls for collective actions, mobilization, public opinion, and political alliances. So, in India also, social movements played a very critical shape in shaping, in bringing about a critical role in shaping the nation's social, political, and economic landscape. From the independence struggle to modern day movements for gender equality, caste justice, environmental protection, labor rights, Indian social movement have constantly worked to address issues of inequality, oppression, and social injustice. And then these movements, they challenge traditional social structures, and then also bring marginalized voices into the policy arena, influencing laws, public policies, and societal norms. If we talk about that, how social policy, there's an integrated approach between policy and social movement. In the 1970s, class-based labor movements were seen having played an important role in the emergence of welfare states. Then in 1990, social policy scholarship began to engage with new social movement theories, asking how new social welfare movements were mobilizing around questions of policy. And then also new movements, social movements, are seen as distinct from the old class-based movements for the reappropriation of the material structure of production, but also for the collective control over socioeconomic development. And then there had been a lot of various incidents where the relationship has been very strong, because through the movements, policies, prescriptions are being revised, reviewed, they are structured, and they also help in understanding that which area, which domain is more necessary, and how the policies will help the marginalized and the weaker section of the population. So this is about social movements, which I have been. Although I have given entire lecture on it, but I just gave a brief about this movements and social. See, I could see few participants, if they have any issue, then they can ask if they have any queries related to it. Otherwise, I hope I'm audible. Am I audible? If you have, there are few participants, Miss Renjusha and Aswathi, Miss Sibina. Are you there, everyone? Am I audible? Am I audible to all? Monish, am I audible to you? Can you hear me, Mr.
Yes, madam.
Monish? Okay. I was just asking if anyone has any query related to this, and if not, then I will talk about a little bit. I'll talk about the welfare part of it, social welfare, and how social welfare is also an important part of social policy. through, because we would need to understand social welfare as a concept where it provides assistance to individuals and families, and it encompasses a wide range of programs. So my next topic for discussion would be social welfare, and how again social welfare is connected with the concept, with the idea of social policy too. If there aren't any queries, so I think I would move ahead with this part. I can briefly cover about social welfare and what is the significance and what is the importance of welfare parts, principles, and how again social welfare has a strong bearing or has a strong connection with social policy. And in fact, welfare, if we talk about the welfare as a concept, it is designed to ensure that all the members of a society can meet the basic needs: food, shelter, education, healthcare. And it is rooted in the idea of social justice, which seeks to reduce any kind of inequalities, providing support for the vulnerable populations. So social welfare is an institution comprising policies and laws that are operationalized by organized activities of voluntary and governmental agencies. It is both public as well as private, by which a defined minimum of social services, money, and other consumption rights are distributed to individual families, groups. And of course, the purpose of the welfare is preventing, alleviating, or contributing to solution of recognized social problems, so as to improve the well-being of the individual, groups, and communities directly. Uh, the idea of welfare particularly relates to well-being, or what is good for people. And it has to be understood in terms of that there are a range of associated with social welfare, right? They are about housing, healthcare, social security, education, basic amenities. These are all related to what kind of services are provided the under the umbrella of welfare, or when we say. So there are definitions, like if I say that one definition according to the document prepared by United Nations social welfare planning in the context of national development plans, social welfare is defined as a body of organized activities which are practically meant to enable individuals, groups, and communities to improve their own situation, adjusting to changing conditions, and participate in the task of development. And the Encyclopedia of Social Work adds that social welfare is for the purpose of ensuring basic standard of physical and mental well-being, and providing universal access to the mainstream of society. Others add that it provides for those who can't cope up by themselves, create social change and modification of social institution, strengthening the society, while it helps individuals and provides services outside the market economy for those who are able to succeed. So, in fact, there is one more explanation to it, that is, it is the society's governmental and non-governmental efforts to help the members function effectively as individuals and as participants in an organized social structure. So there are a lot of it can be said that social welfare is an organized provision of resources and services for the society to deal with various issues and problems. It is also about social interventions which are intended to bring about certain change, or at least maintain the social functioning of human beings. And it is also a kind of a collective interventions to meet the certain needs of the individuals and to serve the wider interest of the society, right? And it can, in the narrow sense, that is, these are the more of a broader part of social welfare. In narrow sense, social welfare includes non-profit functions of society, public or voluntarily, and they are clearly aimed at alleviating distress and poverty, or ameliorating the conditions of casualties of societies. So it generally denotes, it can be said that social welfare generally denotes full range of organized activities of voluntary and governmental organizations which seek to prevent, alleviate, and contribute to the solution of recognized social problems, or to improve the well-being of the individuals. right? There are certain principles of welfare, and that is inherent. Before moving, I mean, it has been said that it is a complex of institutions, services, programs, and they intended to meet the needs of the people in a manner that is conducive for the development and better functioning of people as individuals. So first we need to understand there is inherent dignity and worth of the individual person. Secondly, the possession by each individual person of potentialities and resources for managing his or own life. And every individual has that potential to change his life. He may be or she may be vulnerable, but on the basis of his inherent skill, capacities, intellect, he can or his, and in a way, it can be said that he can change his own destiny, right? And there is a growth in every human beings. They have this potential for growth, and they should be people should be provided certain kind of right kind of support and assistance in achieving these potentials. And then it also talks about the right of the individual person to basic necessities. Every individual, they have this basic rights to the basic necessities like food, shelter, clothing. In fact, today we also talk about healthcare services or medical care, which is again is a right of an individual. So the basic rights has to be ensured that the individual are availing these basic rights. And then of course the importance of freedom to express one's own individuality, and also the people have the right to express their own feelings and opinions. Then the need for the individual person to struggle and to strive to improve one's own life and environment. Every individual has his share of struggles, and they strive, they make efforts to improve their present situation. So it is whether it's mentally, physically, or emotionally. Then the right of every individual to help or assist in times of need and crisis. The importance of self-help and self-reliance becomes the basis of any social welfare program. Then the importance of social organizations in which the individual feels respectable and which is responsive to individual needs. And then the right and responsibility of every individual to participate in the affairs of the social community to which he is belong. And of course, there are certain important significance or the why we need social welfare. Like first of all, to reduce poverty, it provides financial assistance and services to those in need, helping to alleviate poverty and improve living standards. It is social welfare is done, or the importance of it is to promote social justice by ensuring that the basic needs are met. Social welfare program promotes equality and fairness within the society, enabling all individuals to have equal opportunities. It is support for vulnerable groups. Specific programs target vulnerable populations, including children, elderly, disabled, and so on and so forth. Then it brings about economic stability by stabilize the economy, supporting consumption. People have access to basic needs, and they are more likely to participate in the economy, which further would stimulate economic growth. So they are contributors to the GDP. So health and well-being, again, access to healthcare, nutritious food, and safe housing through welfare program leads to better health outcomes. Then social cohesion, human capital development, crisis management, all these are important fact, strong family bonds tend to be important source of social capital, and in taking care of the children, the aged, if we say so. Then this approach is based on conventional wisdom as well as sound sociological theory. Strong family bonds are very important source of sustainable attracting sustainable social support. And public policy analysts therefore perceive the family to be the point of intervention where the state both for meeting the welfare needs and curbing social ills, right? Then the residual perspective approach. The residual perspective conceives of welfare provisions, which has been by the government as the last resort, and it is based on the idea that people can resolve the problems themselves, and the needy can find support through the family, through the market, and non-governmental organizations. Government would only step or intervene when the need is of higher significance, and when the person who is in need is unable to resolve the problem. So in this context, the public provision is made for the residue of the poor only, like those who are extremely below poverty line. And it is this residual approach is followed in few countries, and it has its own limitations. Okay, then the mixed economy approach, like most of the developed nations, a mixed economy approach has been adopted for the social welfare. Like it covers some aspect of the like it covers some part of the expenses on a vulnerable population has been covered by the government, and the rest is through the private market or the family members. So it is based on, again, it is about how these this approach I mean, like the banking insurance or the insurance companies, banking firms, social administration. There is a cooperation between both private as well as public as well as private. So in this model, public and private sectors, they come together in managing the welfare policies in a more efficient manner. And then, of course, we have this institutional approach, which is a normative approach, and it is based on the belief that social welfare can be best promoted through collective action and the pooling of resources. So welfare is provided according to this approach for the population as a whole, in the same way as public services like roads, schools, and etc. Okay, so this is was about the institutional approach. Then there are various social welfare policies. Now, India, a nation which is marked by diverse socioeconomic challenges, social welfare policies are applied to socially underprivileged groups like scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, denotified communities, orphans, widows, uh, unmarried women, delinquent, physically, mentally disabled, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of provisions for such vulnerable population, and for the study we have taken four, like is welfare of women, welfare of children, welfare of youth, and welfare of minorities. In the last lecture of mine, last online live sessions, I discussed about welfare of youth as well as welfare of minorities. And today I'll discuss a little bit about welfare of what welfare measures are there for women. And in fact, there are a lot of provisions and a lot of welfare schemes for the empowerment and welfare of women, and which is again important, which is central to India's development agenda, reflecting nation's commitment to gender equality and social justice. So, women welfare policies in India are designed to address gender disparities, improve the socioeconomic conditions, enhancing women's accessibility to opportunities and resources. In fact, these initiatives cover a wide spectrum for education, and from education and healthcare to financial inclusion and legal rights. Right, there are constitutional rights of women. A lot of constitutional rights of women, like in terms of they not discriminating against any citizen of India. Then their traffic in human beings and forced labor prohibited. The state has to secure men and women equally the right to an adequate means of livelihood, equal work for both Indian men and women. Then it is the state shall make a certain provision for securing just and human conditions of work and maternity relief. Then it also be the duty of every Indian to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. Then in the panchayat also, and in the as well as in the municipalities, seats shall be reserved for women participation. Right, then there are certain legal rights of women, like Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, then Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, then Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act 1986, and Commission of Sati Prevention Act 1987, Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, Maternity Benefit Act 1961, and Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, Preconception Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques, Equal Remuneration, Dissolution. There's a lot of acts, legislations which covers the women. And in fact, a National Commission for Women Act was also being provided, which through which National Commission for Women was institutional non-statutory body was being established to look into the matters related to constitutional legal rights and safeguarding the women's right. And then there's also the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. Now, the 5-year plans also had a lot of welfare measures in terms of what kind of schemes and policies would be there. Then, in fact, the National Policy for Empowerment of Women has also been there. And in 2001, it was considered, the Government of India has declared 2001 as Women's Empowerment Year. The National Policy of Women Empowerment has certain clear goals and objectives, that is creating an environment through positive economic and social policies for full development of women, uh, you know, enjoying equal access, or rather having equal access to participation in decision making, equal access to healthcare. Then a lot of schemes also have been made by the Ministry of Women and Development, like one-stop center, universalization of human women helplines, then Sudhar Greh scheme. This is again when we talk about one-stop center and universalization of women helpline, known as Sakhi centers, which aims to facilitate women affected by violence, including domestic violence, with a range of integrated services under one roof, as such as police facilitation, medical aid, providing legal aid and legal counseling, psychosocial counseling, etc. Right? Then Swadhar Greh scheme being implemented by again the central government, and it is for those who are victims of difficult circumstances in need of institutional support for rehabilitation. Then Rashtra Mahila Kosh, which was established by Department of Women and Child under the Ministry of Human Resource for the purpose of delivery of credit through Women's Development Corporation in the manner of self-help groups. Then Indra Mahila Yojana again was initiated, and the main objective of this was to give a forward thrust to the women education, awareness, income generation capacities, and the empowerment of women. Then Mahila Samriddhi Yojana was also there. Again, it was a kind of it was in terms of monetary benefit to provided to the women, and the incentive was provided so that they can have some financial stability. Then Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, again launched in 2000, which aims to address declining sex ratio as well as related issues of empowerment of girls in women over cycle continuum. And Mahila Shakti Kendra Pradhan Mantri Matru Yojana, Swamasiddha, Swashakti, Swalamba program, all these schemes and programs were being initiated for the welfare of women. And working women hostels, women empowerment and livelihood programs were initiated. Then Mahila Shakti Kendra, Indira Gandhi National Widow Pension Scheme, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras, all there are a lot of various welfare schemes and programs, and which were directed towards the overall development and growth of women in terms of empowering them, in terms of providing them shelter, education, healthcare, accessibility to various institutions, whether it is in educational institutions, private institutions, voluntary institutions, making their contribution in the GDP also very also valid, and when they become, in fact, contributors to the GDP, their economic participation is equally recognized to various laws and legislations. So that was all about the welfare of women. And I think again, I think there aren't any questions. If there are any queries, if people have any, I mean, they want to ask, inquire, they are most welcome. I guess there aren't any queries, and I mean, this paper of is very. I mean, through this paper, I tried to give in detail various aspects of social policy, the objectives, characteristics, how social policies are created, and I've also spoken about the movements and welfare. I think there aren't any queries. So, thank you, everyone. I take your leave. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Again, I would like to ask, and I'm encouraging any participant to have any queries or anything they want to know, they want to ask, they are free to ask. Otherwise, I'll stop here. And in my tomorrow, again, I have a live session again, and again I will take some other discuss another topic for this live session, so that if there are any queries, you can go ahead with it. Are there any queries, anything which you need to know, which you need to ask? You're free to ask. I think there aren't any queries. So, anyhow, the participants who are here, I welcome them and I thank them for their time, and I hope they do well in their exams. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
We're getting lost. We're getting lost. Some people will.
Are there any queries? Somebody needs to ask anything? I think there aren't any questions. Or thank you all for your time, and I think I would end the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.